who has been out, in fact, in California at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory to monitor Voyager 2 for us, has been her challenge this week, has also, while we've been on the air working the telephones to the various mission controls. Lynn, simple question again, anything?
Well, I've been talking to a number of people, Peter, and first of all, nobody knows anything yet. I just spoke to another one of the former astronauts from the shuttle program who, without knowing anything, thinks that it might have been a rupture of some kind that caused the tank to ignite. In other words, maybe one of the fuel lines leading into the engines of the tank, engines of the shuttle, excuse me. It seems clear that both solid rocket boosters were thrown free or were pushed aside and went to their own destination, still, as you can see or as you will see in just a few seconds, almost intact or intact. They have to be intact. Almost intact wouldn't mean anything. Just take a look at that. What we're looking at is obviously a still frame, and that's the flame starting. And if there were a rupture on the tank, you're looking at the shuttle on the right. Let me do it with the model, if I may. Here's the that's the view that you were looking at. I think was actually probably that way. Is that right? And if the shuttle is on its back, and the tank is here, and the boosters are on the side, as you've showed us so many times, the boosters seem to have gotten away. Let's take a look at that tape, and we'll look at it again. The boosters seem to get away okay, which may mean that the rupture was in a fuel line in the tank. Now, look at that flame right there. If we could stop that tape, if that's possible. The flame is at the base, the bottom of the external tank. That's where the fuel would go into the shuttle's main engines. And that appears to be the first flame. Is it, in fact, the first flame? Obviously, I don't know. Okay, let's roll a little bit more, and what you'll see will happen as it keeps going. The flame then, obviously, that very thin-skinned external tank with all that liquid hydrogen and oxygen is so volatile, so flammable, is just going to go. Keep going. And as the flame appears to be spreading, now the whole tank will go, but the boosters get thrown free. And then, as Peter, you've pointed out a number of times, they just go sent off in the wrong direction, but they are not exploding in any way. What we're talking about, obviously, that orange blob in the middle, the long sort of pencil-looking, the long fat pencil, the crayon, is the external tank. And if that ruptures, then the boosters, those two white crayons on the side, would simply be sent on their way the wrong way, and they would go until they fizzle out, and then they go down into the ocean, and they are supposed to be recovered for another mission.
Well, Lynn, here's a note for you. We've had a report from Cape Canaveral that they found bits of the booster rockets. Now, is that normal? I thought they could be recovered intact.
You're quite right. It is not normal. They should be recovered intact because they do get reused. But there you see on the right what appears to be a perfectly normal rocket burn. Again, going the wrong direction. It's supposed to be attached to the shuttle and heading up or heading out. Instead, it appears to be heading down. But there does not appear to be any kind of I repeat, appear to be anything unusual about that. If there were an explosion within the tank, as we're speculating, it is possible that it could have affected a piece of one of the boosters, which may account for why there are pieces of the boosters. But I don't want to take this too far because it's dangerous without really knowing what happened.
Well,
but Peter, you're entirely right that if they find pieces of a booster, obviously the booster did not make it intact.
Well, I would like you to ask one question, and I couldn't agree with you more that getting too deep. We've only got about 15 minutes before NASA promises they're going to come and tell us something. But one of the European scientists, Mike Lee, told us earlier this morning, it speculated that the bad weather at the Cape, particularly the cold, that Arctic wind that pushed down right into the deep south in the last couple of days, may have had some effect on the main tank. Is that a consideration at least?
Sure, it has to be. Everything has to be a consideration because this has never happened before. So everything has to be taken into account.
Well, how about normal circumstances?
I saw the same pictures as you did this morning with the icicles surrounding the shuttle. The shuttle is not used to that, and in the past they've had a problem. They're worried that the ice is going to knock against the tiles during liftoff and maybe hurt some of the tiles. It was my understanding that they had teams in there knocking those icicles off so that they would be away from the fuel lines so that there could not be a problem. I don't know. Yes, of course you have to take everything into consideration.
I must tell you one other thing, which is a report only from Cape Canaveral, and it's really talking about the people on the search teams now. who've been out for a couple of hours to say that while they found bits of the booster rockets, they have found no signs of life. Lynn, thank you very much for joining us. To remind you that this was the 10th flight for Challenger and the 25th of the entire shuttle program. And in this city, and it may be a reflection of what you're asking yourselves all over the country today, it has certainly been raised by those people we heard from in Western Europe, but that's in part because they have an unmanned space program, the efficacy of sending civilians or man into space generally. It has always been, in contrast to the Soviet space program for a long period of time, much more ambitious manned program. You will recall back in the 1950s when Sputnik, that thing the size of a grapefruit, orbited around and sent this nation into something of a deep shock, particularly the administration. It was determined to get ahead of the Soviets in the space program. And it was really that which led in large measure to the emergence of the Mercury astronauts, people like John Glenn and Alan Shepard, who we saw this morning, who 25 years later became American heroes a second time round when they became the subject of a very highly popular, I wouldn't say altogether highly popular, but certainly highly publicized movie called The Right Stuff. And on Capitol Hill today, as you heard Charlie Gibson say, and you've seen Jake Garr, the senator who's flown, and Senator John Glenn, very much in contrast to those critics of the Space Administration who want things to slow down in a drastic way. Lynn, if you had to make a guess at this point, and I realize it only is a guess, would you think, based on your association with politics and space, that the space program would have a serious slowdown?
A serious slowdown, Peter?
Yeah.
Is that what you said?
Yes.
Absolutely. I don't think there's any question. I mean, after the fire, it was, 18 months before things got back on track. I think this is going to be a very serious slowdown. But I think it is also true that they will do their investigation, that they will find out what they think happened, and that they will surmount it. I cannot imagine in any way, shape, or form that this is the end of the American manned space program. They've got a lot of work to do, but having done it, they will then be better for it, sadder for it, wiser for it. But sure, it's going to go on. But yes, indeed, it will be a terrible setback.
What does it do to the
missions
American...
plan for the...
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
No, you please go ahead.
I was just going to say, the missions plan for this year alone, NASA's been building up to this. These were very, very important in terms of space science and in terms of American technology and in terms of what the space program wanted to be. Part of this year's program was to prove that they could just go ahead and do it. And of course, that's all stopped now.
What does it do to the American space program competitively? There are competitors out there, certainly in terms of the shuttle mission, the unmanned spacecraft in Europe. What does it do to us competitively?
Well, if again, let us just purely speculate, if the American space program is on hold for 6 months or a year, and I don't know that that's what's going to happen, then somebody who needs a satellite lifted up there sooner rather than later might want to go to one of the competitors. It is not clear to me that there is space available on any of those unmanned competitors for immediate launch. They have their backups as well. The Ariane spacecraft has not lifted off perfectly every single time. They've had their accidents. Luckily, they don't have people on board. It hasn't been quite as tragic as today. But the Chinese have had problems. They've got spacecraft going up. So sure, NASA could very well lose some business if there is room available on other rockets going up and if it is so important to the people who need their satellites or whatever launched that they will choose to go somewhere else. Could be a terrible setback.
I hope you won't mind a family remark, but now I know why you cover space for us, Lynn. Thank you very much. We'll get back to you. We said earlier